Have you ever wondered if just a few simple habits could completely transform your financial future? Welcome to Yes You Can, where we turn practical wisdom into real-life results. Today, I'm sharing the 3 money habits that genuinely changed my life, each one inspired by the legendary Jim Rohn. He once said, "Formal education will make you a living, self-education will make you a fortune." And those words lit a spark in me that I'll never forget. If you're tired of feeling stuck or overwhelmed by money advice that seems out of reach, you're in the right place. In this episode, I'll break down the daily practices that help me take control, shift my mindset, and open doors I never thought possible. Whether you're just starting your financial journey or looking for new inspiration, these habits are for everyone, simple, powerful, and proven. Let's dive in and see how you can put them to work in your own life. Let's start with a question. Have you ever come across a single idea that just stops you in your tracks? For me, that idea came from Jim Rohn. If you don't know him, Jim Rohn was a self-made millionaire, mentor to some of the world's most successful people, and someone whose words have shaped how millions of us think about life, money, and growth. But what makes his wisdom so powerful isn't complicated theory or fancy jargon. It's how simple, almost obvious, his advice seems until you realize you haven't actually been living it. There's one quote from Jim that changed everything for me. He said, "Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune." Just let that soak in for a second. We grow up thinking school is everything. Get good grades, get a diploma, get a job, that's the formula, right? But nobody tells you what happens after that. Nobody explains that your real growth, your real success, comes from what you choose to learn once the classes end. And that's where Jim Rohn's philosophy hits home. He talks about the difference between being taught and teaching yourself. Between following a path that's already laid out, or picking up the map and exploring for yourself. Why does that matter? Because the world is changing faster than ever. Skills that mattered yesterday might not pay the bills tomorrow. Jobs that existed last year might be gone the next. But your ability to keep learning, on your own, by your own choice, that's what makes you irreplaceable. Jim believed that if you want to change your life, you have to start by changing your mind. It's not about the economy. It's not about luck. It's not about waiting for someone to show you the way. It's about shifting your mindset from "I have to "I get to." From "I can't do that" to "I wonder how I could learn that." That sounds simple, but let me be honest, making that shift isn't always easy. I know what it's like to feel stuck, or to think, this is just how things are for people like me. But every bit of growth I've experienced, every time I've moved forward, started with a tiny tweak in how I thought about myself and my possibilities. Jim Rohn had this way of making the complicated seem doable. He'd say, "Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better." It sounds tough at first, but it's actually empowering. Because it means you're not powerless. You don't have to wait for your circumstances to change. You can change, right here, right now. And when you do, when you focus just a little more energy on learning, on improving, on building yourself, everything else starts to shift. Your finances, your relationships, your confidence, your future. The core idea in Jim's teachings is that we become the person we decide to be, not the person we're told we have to be. And that journey always starts with self-education. Not just reading more books, or signing up for more courses, although those help. but developing a hunger for learning. A willingness to ask questions and chase after answers, even when it feels uncomfortable. That's what separates people who keep growing from those who stay stuck. Jim also talked a lot about the value of small changes. He would say, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. You just have to make one better choice today, then do it again tomorrow. I remember the moment I realized I was waiting for something outside of myself to change. Maybe a new job, or a lucky break, or someone to finally notice my potential. But all that waiting got me nowhere. It was only when I started looking inside, when I realized I could teach myself new things, start new habits, and shape my own path, that things began to change. Jim's philosophy is all about taking responsibility for your own growth. Not in a harsh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of way, but in a deeply empowering way. He reminds us that we don't have to settle for where we are. No matter your background, no matter how stuck you feel right now, you have the power to become something more. But it starts with seeing yourself as your most important investment. Think about that for a second. We spend so much time worrying about money, about jobs, about what other people think of us. What if you made the decision, today, to invest just a little more energy in your own growth? In learning something new? In asking better questions? In believing you can change? That's the heart of what Jim Rohn taught. He didn't preach get-rich-quick schemes or magical secrets to success. He encouraged people to do the simple, sometimes boring, sometimes uncomfortable work of getting a little bit better every day. And the magic is, once you start, you realize that growth is addictive. Learning is exciting. You see opportunities that were invisible before. Doors you thought were closed start to crack open. Maybe you find a new way to save money. Or you notice a skill you can build that other people will pay for. Or you just start to like yourself a little more because you know you're not standing still. Millions of people have been influenced by Jim Rohn for this exact reason. His ideas aren't tied to a specific job or a certain era. They're universal. They apply to anyone who's willing to take ownership, even just a little, over where their life is going. And it all starts with self-education and a mindset shift. Let's talk about what that really means, because I think self-education can sound intimidating. It doesn't mean you have to read 100 books a year or become an overnight expert in something. It means you decide your growth matters. You carve out time, even just a few minutes a day, to learn something new. You treat your own mind like your most precious asset. Jim used to say, your income rarely exceeds your personal development. When you hear that, you realize that the ceiling on your success usually isn't your job or your boss, it's how much you're willing to invest in growing your own skills, your own mindset, your own abilities. And here's the beautiful part, nobody can do that work for you, but nobody can take it away from you, either. Once you start that journey, once you see yourself as a work in progress, as someone who's always learning, you become resilient. You bounce back from setbacks faster. You spot chances others miss. You don't get as thrown off when life surprises you, because you know you can keep adapting. I think a lot of us get stuck waiting for perfect timing, or for someone else's permission to start. But Jim's wisdom keeps coming back to this, you don't need anyone's permission to grow. You can start today. You can start right now. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to take the first step, and then the next. That's how real change happens. Not in giant leaps, but in small, steady moves forward. Over time, those tiny steps add up to something massive. When I look back at my own journey, every breakthrough started with deciding to learn something I didn't know before, or questioning an old belief that wasn't serving me anymore, or just being a bit more curious about how things worked and how I could make them work for me. Jim made it clear that mindset isn't about positive thinking alone. It's about seeing the world as full of possibilities and seeing yourself as capable of taking action. It's about trading excuses for experiments. Trying, failing, adjusting, and trying again. Self-education is the fuel for that process. It's what keeps you moving, even when the path isn't clear. And it's what opens up options you never even knew existed. If you're listening to this and thinking, "I'm too old for that," or "I'm too far behind," I just want you to know, that's not true. You can start at any age, from any background, with any level of experience. Jim Rohn himself started out as a farm boy from Idaho. He wasn't born into wealth. He didn't have special connections. He built his future one lesson, one habit, one choice at a time. And his message has rippled out to millions because it's true for all of us. Your potential isn't fixed, it grows every time you choose to learn. And every time you choose to see yourself as someone who can change and grow, you take back a little more control over your future. That's why his wisdom matters so much. It's not just good advice. It's a blueprint for turning small, thoughtful actions into a life that feels like your own. If you take nothing else from his teachings, remember this. Success isn't something you find, it's something you become. And you become it, one step at a time, by feeding your mind, building your skills, and believing that change is possible for you. You don't have to buy into anyone else's story about what's possible. You get to write your own. And it all starts with a mindset shift, a willingness to own your growth and to keep learning, no matter where you're starting from. In the rest of this episode, I'll get into the exact habits that helped me put Jim's philosophy into action, the ones that made the biggest difference in my life and finances. But before we go there, I just want you to ask yourself, what's one thing you could learn today that would bring you a little closer to the life you want? Because that's how big changes begin. With a single spark, one new idea, one mindset shift, one choice to keep going, even when it's hard. Jim Rohn's wisdom is a reminder that the power to change is in your hands. And that's where every great journey begins. So let's dive into the very first habit, the one that, honestly, changed everything for me. I know, tracking your spending doesn't sound glamorous. When I first heard about it, it almost felt too simple. I mean, I'd read a lot of advice about elaborate budgets and complicated spreadsheets, and, frankly, I'd always found it overwhelming. So most of the time, I just ignored it. I thought, if I'm careful, I'll be fine. But the truth is, I wasn't fine. Every month felt like a surprise. I'd check my bank account and wonder, where did my money actually go? Jim Rohn talks a lot about awareness. He says, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. But before discipline, there's something even more basic, there's awareness. You can't change what you don't see. You can't steer a ship if you have no idea where it's drifting. And for years, I was just drifting. I wasn't steering anything. So, one day, I decided to do something radical. Not radical for most people, maybe, but for me, at the time, it was a huge step. I decided to write down every single dollar I spent. Nothing fancy, just a notepad and a pen. Every coffee, every little snack, every online purchase, every bus ticket. I started tracking absolutely everything. Those first few days, I was shocked. Actually, let me be honest, I was a bit embarrassed. I saw the little leaks everywhere. $5 here. $10 there. Takeout because I was tired. An impulse buy because I wanted to pick me up. None of these were bad on their own, but added up, they told a story. And it was a story I didn't love. That's the power of tracking. It's not about judging yourself or feeling guilty. It's about shining a light. It's about understanding your own habits, your own patterns. It's about getting curious, not critical. And something amazing happened when I stuck to this simple practice. I started having choices. Because once you know where your money is going, you get to decide if that's where you want it to go. That's where the control comes in, not in depriving yourself, but in choosing with intention. And that is such a powerful shift. At first, tracking felt tedious. I'd forget to jot things down. Sometimes I'd spend cash and realize, 3 days later, I had no idea where it went. But every time I fell off, I gently brought myself back. No beating myself up. Just returning to the practice. To make it stick, I had to find a rhythm that worked for me. Some people love apps. For me, it started with a notepad, and then I graduated to a simple spreadsheet on my laptop. I added all my spending at the end of each day. It became almost meditative. A little check-in with myself. Just 5 minutes, but it made a difference. And once the habit was in place, something fascinating happened. I started making different choices without forcing myself. When I could actually see, in black and white, how much I was spending on delivery food every month, it was hard to ignore. Not because I felt guilty, but because I realized what that money could do instead. Suddenly, I found room in my budget for things that actually mattered. Things that aligned with the life I wanted to build. I'll talk more about that in the next habit, but for now, I want to linger on this idea. Awareness is the foundation of all meaningful change. I want you to imagine for a second, you're building a house. Would you ever start without looking at the ground first? Without checking if the land is solid? Of course not. But so many of us try to get better with money without ever understanding our starting point. And that's what tracking gives you, a map of where you are, so you can decide where you want to go. For me, I had to face some uncomfortable truths. I realized I was spending a lot of money just because I was tired, or bored, or stressed. Treating myself felt like self-care, but when I looked closer, sometimes it was just autopilot. Sometimes it was avoidance. Those little spending leaks weren't actually making me happier, they just filled the moment, and the moment passed. When I saw those patterns on paper, it was like meeting myself for the first time. Not always easy, but absolutely necessary. Here's a simple technique that helped me when I was just starting. I called it the 24-hour tally. Every evening, before bed, I'd ask myself, where did my money go today? If I couldn't remember, I'd check my receipts or my bank app. Even if I missed something, I'd write it down as best as I could. Some days, it was 3 lines. Other days, it covered half a page. The point wasn't perfection, it was progress. Over time, this habit gave me a kind of superpower. If I wanted to make a big purchase, I didn't agonize. I just looked at my tally and asked, do I want this more than everything else I could do with this money? Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes it was no. But either way, it was a choice. A conscious choice, not just a reaction. Maybe you're thinking, but what if I mess up? What if I forget? What if I fall behind and get discouraged? Trust me, I did, too. There were weeks when I gave up tracking, especially when things got busy or stressful. But every time I came back to it, I felt better. More grounded. More in control. And the longer I did it, the easier it became. That's why I encourage you, if you're thinking about trying this, start as simply as possible. Don't get lost in the details. You don't need a fancy app. You don't need a beautiful journal. A piece of paper works. Your phone's notes app works. The important thing is to start. Today, if you can. Make it visible. Put your notebook by the coffee maker, or set a reminder on your phone. Some people like to share their progress with a friend, just to stay accountable. Others keep it completely private. Do whatever feels right for you. And, this is key, be kind to yourself. You're not going to do it perfectly. No one does. But every little bit of awareness is a win. Even if you only track half your spending this week, that's more than last week. You're building a new habit, and new habits always take a little time. Another thing that helped me, I started looking for the why behind my spending. Not just what I bought, but why I bought it. Was I hungry? Was I stressed? Did I just want a break from work? The more I got curious, the more patterns I saw. And some of those patterns surprised me. Some, honestly, made me laugh at myself. Like the realization that every time I went for groceries hungry, my spending doubled. Or that every Friday night, I'd buy things online as a reward for a tough week. Once I noticed, I could decide, do I want to keep doing this? Or is there a better way to take care of myself? So, here's the big lesson I learned from tracking every dollar. Control starts with awareness, and awareness starts with honesty. Not judgment, not shame, just honest curiosity. It's a chance to meet yourself where you are, and to gently, over time, steer towards something better. Jim Rohn used to say, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." I love that quote. For me, tracking every dollar wasn't about making life harder. It was about making myself better, bit by bit, day by day. If you're worried you'll feel restricted, let me offer this. In my experience, tracking didn't make me feel deprived. It made me feel free. I stopped worrying about money all the time, because I actually knew what was happening. I stopped feeling guilty about little treats, because I built them into my plan. I got to say yes to the things that mattered, because I knew where to say no. That's not restriction, that's empowerment. I remember the first month I stuck with it the whole way through. At the end, I sat down with my notes, added up the numbers, and for the first time, I could see exactly what my life cost. And you know what? It was less than I feared. The anxiety I had about running out of money, it was just a fog, a feeling. The facts were far less scary. That was the beginning of a new confidence for me. I could plan. I could adjust. I could dream a little bigger. And it all started with that small, humble habit, writing it down. I want to encourage you, if you're feeling overwhelmed, or like your financial goals are far off, start here. Track what you spend for a week. then for a month. Don't worry about changing anything at first. Just watch. Get curious. Be honest. You have to know where you are before you build where you want to go. And if it feels like too much, remember, you are not alone. Most of us were never taught this habit. Most of us grew up with money as a source of stress, or secrecy, or even shame. But it doesn't have to be that way moving forward. Every time you track a dollar, you're telling yourself, I'm paying attention. I'm in charge. This is how you start to build trust with yourself. One little act at a time. To wrap up this habit, let me just say, tracking every dollar isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's a daily, sometimes boring, sometimes surprising act of self-respect. It's you saying, my future is worth a few minutes of my attention today. And that's a message your mind, and your money, will hear loud and clear. So, before we move on to the next habit, I invite you to give it a try. Just for a week, even a few days. See what you discover. You might be surprised at what you learn. You might even find, like I did, that it's the single most important step on your journey to financial freedom. All right, ready for the next habit? Let's talk about the power of investing in your mind, and how that one change completely reframed my relationship with money. When I first heard Jim Rohn say, formal education will make you a living, self-education will make you a fortune, I'll admit, I didn't get it right away. I thought, hey, I went to school. I did what I was supposed to do. But there was something about the way he said it, the quiet certainty in his voice. It stuck with me. It kept echoing. And after a while, I realized what he meant. If I wanted to truly change my life, I needed to take ownership of my learning, not just my earning. So I decided to try something new. I started dedicating a small part of my budget, just a little bit each month, to buying books. It wasn't much at first. Honestly, it felt a little risky. Spending money on something that didn't have an immediate payoff? That felt uncomfortable. It almost felt irresponsible, especially when I was still figuring out my own finances. But I kept hearing about this idea from Jim Rohn and other people I respected, this concept that investing in your own mind is the best investment you can make. So I took the plunge. Instead of spending on yet another streaming service or fast food, I bought my first personal finance book. It was less than $10. And let me tell you, that single paperback changed the trajectory of my entire year. The thing is, when you read a great book, something happens in your mind. You start to see possibilities you didn't know were there. You get a peek behind the curtain at how other people think, solve problems, and build lives that are meaningful and successful. That first book, then the next one, and the next, gave me tools and strategies I never learned at school. Not just about money, but about discipline, purpose, and how to actually create momentum in your life. I started to see the pattern, too. Jim Rohn always talked about lifelong learning, not as a one-time class, but as a habit. He said, if you want things to change, you have to change. And to change, you have to grow. No one else can do the growing for you. There's this story I love from Jim's seminars. He'd say, miss a meal, but don't miss a book. At first, I laughed because, come on, skipping dinner for a book? But he was making a point. It's not about starving yourself, it's about priorities. What you feed your mind is even more important than what you feed your body. And the truth is, a great book is a meal for your mind and spirit. So how do you actually make this work? If you're like me, you might be thinking, I don't have a ton of money to spend on books. That's okay. Start small. That's exactly what I did. Pick one book. It doesn't have to be expensive or brand new. Secondhand bookstores, libraries, even audiobook apps, they all count. The real commitment isn't the price. It's deciding that from now on, you're going to set aside something, time, attention, a few dollars, to invest in yourself. For me, it was setting a rule: every month, a portion of any fund money I had would go to a new book or course. If you're on a tight budget, you might make it every 2 months or even once a quarter. The frequency doesn't matter as much as the intention. I treated it like a bill I paid to my future self. But I'll be honest, buying a book is only the first step. Because it's easy to let those books pile up and never crack them open. I did that at first. There were weeks when I just didn't feel like reading. But Jim Rohn's voice kept coming back to me: don't let your learning lead to knowledge. Let your learning lead to action. He wasn't just talking about absorbing information. He was talking about taking what you learn and actually doing something with it. So I started a new habit. Every time I finished a book, I would write down 3 ideas, just 3, that I wanted to try. Not big, complicated plans. Just simple things I could do that week. Maybe it was setting up a savings account, changing how I set goals, or trying a new way to track habits. That's where the real magic happened. The more I put into action, the more my confidence grew. And I started to see real results: less financial stress, more savings, and a totally different mindset about what was possible for me. It's funny, looking back, I thought buying books was about collecting information. But really, it was about changing the way I saw myself. Every author I read, from Jim Rohn to the next person, became a kind of mentor. They challenged me to step up, to ask better questions, to expect more from myself. Jim often said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." If you think about it, books let you sit down with brilliant minds anytime you want. You can spend time with people who have already walked the path you're trying to find. You can borrow their courage, their perspective, their wisdom, especially when you need it most. I can't tell you how many times I've felt stuck or discouraged, and then picked up a book and found exactly the sentence I needed to hear. It sounds a little magical, but it's real. Books became my lifeline, my training ground when I didn't know what to do next. And here's the thing: you don't need hours and hours every day. Most days, I just read for 10 or 15 minutes. Sometimes while waiting in line, or right before bed. The point isn't to race through books, it's to let new ideas seep into your day, little by little. There are a few practical tricks that made this habit stick for me. First, I kept a book within reach. In my bag, on my phone, next to the couch. That way, the barrier to picking it up was as low as possible. Second, I gave myself permission to stop reading books I didn't enjoy. Life's too short to slog through something that doesn't light you up. Third, whenever I finished a book, I'd talk about it with a friend or make a short note about what I learned. That helped me remember the lessons and stay accountable. Maybe you're wondering where to start. Honestly, it depends on what you need most right now. For some, it might be a book about managing money or paying down debt. For others, it could be about motivation, habits, or personal growth. My first pick was a simple introduction to budgeting. But after that, I branched out to books on psychology, biographies, even novels that made me see the world differently. If you want specific recommendations, here are a few that made a huge difference for me. The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. Simple, timeless lessons about money that anyone can use. Atomic Habits by James Clear. This one completely changed how I approach building routines. Mindset by Carol Dweck. Powerful insights on how your beliefs shape your results about money, work, and life. And of course, anything by Jim Rohn. His books and talks are like having a wise uncle in your corner. But honestly, the perfect book is the one that speaks to you right now. Let yourself be curious. Follow what interests you, not just what you think you should read. One thing I love about Jim Rohn's philosophy is that he never pretended there was a single secret or shortcut. He believed that growth is a lifelong journey. He said, "Learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job." At first, that sounds backwards. But when you think about it, your mind, your attitude, your skills, your vision, that's what determines everything else. If you grow yourself, everything around you changes. I started noticing that every time I invested in a book, I was voting for my future. I wasn't just spending money, I was telling myself, "You're worth this. Your goals matter." That small shift, treating personal growth as essential, not optional, had a ripple effect across everything else. Suddenly, I was looking for ways to learn, not just reasons to save a few bucks. It wasn't always easy. There were months when money was tight, and the old voice in my head said, "Shouldn't you be practical?" But every time I stuck with it, I found that I never regretted the investment. Because knowledge pays dividends no one can take from you. And here's something important: the more you learn, the more opportunities you notice. It's almost like new doors start appearing, just because you're looking at the world differently. New skills, new connections, new ideas, they all start with the decision to keep growing. If you're listening and you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, please hear this: you don't need a master plan or a fat wallet to start. You just need the willingness to invest in your mind, even in small ways. Set aside a little money, a little time, and take the first step. Pick up a book. Read a chapter. Let those new ideas challenge you, inspire you, and push you forward. Jim Rohn changed my life not because he gave me all the answers, but because he taught me how to look for them. That's the real secret. The more you learn, the more you realize how much more there is to discover. It becomes a positive cycle with curiosity, action, growth, repeat. So if you remember nothing else from this segment, remember this: the best investment you can ever make is in yourself. Books are just the doorway. Learning is the journey. And your life will expand in ways you can't even predict, just by walking through it. Take the leap. Feed your mind. And as Jim Rohn would say, don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better. That's what this is all about. Let's keep growing, one page at a time. Once I started tracking my money and really investing in my mind, something incredible happened. I began to see opportunities all around me. But here's the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. Opportunity almost always shows up in the form of a skill you haven't learned yet. That's where this next habit comes in. It's all about skill building for real-world wealth. And for me, this was the game changer. Let's talk about why skills matter. Money, at its core, is an exchange of value. When you have a skill, something people need, something that solves a problem or makes life better, you have value to offer. Jim Rohn had this way of putting it: if you want to be wealthy, learn to bring value to the marketplace. It sounds simple, but it is so powerful. The more useful you become, the more doors you open. I'll never forget the moment this clicked for me. I was sitting with a group of friends, all talking about their jobs, their side hustles, and their plans. There was this one friend who seemed to have opportunities just falling into his lap. He wasn't the smartest guy in the room, or the most outgoing, but he was always teaching himself something new. He'd picked up graphic design watching YouTube videos. He'd learned basic coding on the weekends just because he was curious. And every time someone in our group needed something, a logo, a website, a quick tutorial on Excel, he was the go-to. He wasn't an expert at everything, but he knew enough to get started. People trusted him. They paid him. And over time, that built into something bigger than a side hustle. That's when I realized, skills are assets. Not the kind you keep in a bank, but the kind you use to carve out your own path. Jim Rohn talked a lot about self-education, but he also emphasized practical skills, real abilities that you can use to solve problems or help others. He used to say, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." That line stuck with me. Because, honestly, I spent a lot of years wishing things would just get easier. Wishing for a better job to magically appear or for my big break to just show up. But it doesn't work like that. The world rewards people who are willing to learn, to adapt, to keep sharpening their edge. So, that's what I started doing. I made a list of things I was curious about, not necessarily passionate, just interested enough to spend a weekend messing around. I tried out basic photography with my old phone. I learned how to use spreadsheets to track projects, not just my budget. Anytime I found myself stuck, confused, or saying I wish I knew how to, I'd write it down. Slowly, those little skills added up. I built a portfolio of small wins. Here's the beautiful thing. You don't have to become an expert overnight. You just have to become more useful than you were yesterday. Every new thing you learn is like putting another tool in your backpack. You might not use it today or tomorrow, but I promise the day will come when you pull it out and surprise yourself. The first real breakthrough I had came from learning a bit of graphic design. I'd always assumed it was something for creative people, people with fancy software and art degrees. But one day, a friend needed a flyer made for a fundraiser. I offered to help, even though I'd never opened a design app before. It was a mess at first. I was Googling everything, watching tutorials, asking dumb questions. But by the end of the weekend, I'd put together something halfway decent. People noticed. A week later, another friend asked if I could help with a logo. I charged $20. Was it a masterpiece? Not even close. But it was the start of me realizing I can learn things I never thought I could. And those things can make me money, or at least open doors that were invisible before. Jim Rohn's philosophy became my compass through all this. He was adamant that you shouldn't wait for someone else to teach you what you want to know. He said, learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. It's not about working yourself into the ground, but about investing in yourself, skill by skill. Because you are the only asset you truly control. So, how do you actually put this into practice? How do you figure out which skills to focus on, especially if you don't know where to start? I want to break it down with a simple roadmap I followed and still use today. Step 1. Start with curiosity. Forget about what will make you money right away. Ask yourself, what do people ask me for help with? What do I find myself Googling on a Saturday afternoon just for fun? What's one thing, just one, that would make life easier for me if I could do it myself? Maybe it's learning how to build a website. Maybe it's baking bread, organizing a closet, or making videos. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is to pick something and start. Step 2. Go micro. Break down big skills into bite-sized pieces. If you want to learn graphic design, don't try to master Photoshop in a weekend. Start with one project, like making a flyer for a friend or creating a simple image for social media. If you want to be better at public speaking, try recording yourself talking for 5 minutes on your phone. You don't need a giant leap, you need small steps, repeated often. Step 3. Set up learning routines. Jim Rohn called this a life of constant and never-ending improvement. He wasn't talking about cramming for hours every night. He meant carving out little pockets in your day for growth. For me, that looked like watching a 20-minute tutorial before bed, or practicing a new spreadsheet trick on my lunch break. Make it a habit, not a chore. Consistency matters more than intensity. Step 4. Look for leverage. What do I mean by that? Some skills unlock other skills. For example, learning how to write a clear email makes you better at communicating in any context. Knowing how to organize your time makes every other skill easier to develop. Focus on meta skills, the ones that make you better at learning itself. Things like problem solving, clear communication, and managing your own motivation. Those are like multipliers. Step 5. Share what you learn. This was a big one for me. I used to keep my new skills to myself, worried I'd look like a beginner. But when I started helping others, even just showing a friend how to use a budgeting app, I learned twice as fast. Teaching forces you to clarify what you know. It builds confidence. And, honestly, it's how you get noticed. Every opportunity I've had came from sharing what I was learning, not from being the expert in the room. People gravitate toward learners, toward people who are willing to figure things out, even if they mess up at first. Let me underline something really important. Skill building is not about chasing trends or trying to learn everything at once. It's about aligning your growth with your goals and your values. Jim Rohn used to ask, "What's your philosophy? What do you believe about work?" about life, about yourself? When you're clear on that, you can choose skills that fit into the life you want to build. I wanted more freedom, more options, and the ability to help people around me. So I learned skills that gave me those things, step by step. Now, you might be wondering, how do you know when you're learning the right skill? The honest answer is, you won't always know at first. Some skills you try will fizzle out. Others will catch fire and take you places you never expected. It's okay to move on from something that doesn't click. What matters is that you keep learning, keep experimenting, keep moving forward. Here's what I recommend. Every month, pick one skill to explore. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's editing videos, or fixing something around the house, or using a new productivity app. Make a tiny project out of it. Give yourself permission to be bad at first. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. And if you stick with it, you'll look back a year from now and be amazed at how far you've come. Another piece of advice from Jim Rohn that helped me was to be a student, not a follower. He meant that you should take ideas from lots of places, try them out, and keep what works for you. Don't get stuck thinking there's only one way to do things. Let yourself be flexible. Let yourself be surprised. Some of the skills that turned into real assets for me were things I almost skipped over. Learning how to negotiate, just reading a few articles and practicing with friends, saved me hundreds of dollars on car repairs and rent. Getting comfortable with spreadsheets didn't just help my budget, it made me more valuable at work and on projects with friends. Figuring out the basics of video editing? That skill opened up a whole new side project and led to collaborations I never could have predicted. None of these things happened overnight. But each one started as a curiosity, a small step, and a willingness to keep going even when it felt awkward. So, if you're listening and thinking, I don't know if I'm really a skill builder type person, I promise, you already are. Every time you solve a problem, help a friend, or even look up a how-to video online, you're building your toolkit. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need to spend a ton of money. There are more resources than ever before, many of them free. One thing I love about Jim Rohn's philosophy is how empowering it is. He always said, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. Skill building is one of those disciplines. It's the daily practice of getting just a little bit better, so you have more to offer to your job, your family, your community, and, most importantly, to yourself. If you start to see yourself as a work in progress, as someone who's always adding new tools to their backpack, you stop waiting for opportunities and start creating them. You realize that your value doesn't come from your title, your background, or your current job. It comes from what you can do and what you're willing to keep learning. That's the real wealth. It's not just money in the bank, it's the confidence that you can figure things out, adapt, and grow no matter what life throws at you. So, what's one skill you've been curious about lately? What's one tiny step you could take this week to get started? Maybe it's signing up for a free online course, watching a 10-minute tutorial, or just asking a friend how they learned what they know. Remember, it's not about being the best. It's about being a little better than you were yesterday. And here's the best part. As you build skills, you build momentum. Momentum turns into confidence. Confidence opens doors. Suddenly, you're not just reacting to life, you're shaping it. That's what Jim Rohn meant when he talked about building real wealth. It's wealth you carry with you everywhere, no matter where you go or what challenges you face. So, as you think about your own journey, remember, tracking your dollars gives you awareness. Investing in your mind gives you vision. And building skills gives you freedom. It's a powerful combination. And it's available to you, starting right now. Let's keep going. Let's keep learning. Because every skill you build is another step toward the life you want and the person you want to be. Now, let's talk about the messy part, setbacks and staying consistent. Honestly, this is the real story behind any transformation. It's not the highlights you see on Instagram or those polished before and after moments. For me, the turning points were actually the moments when I felt completely stuck. When I felt like giving up would be easier than taking one more uncomfortable step forward. I remember the first time I tried tracking every dollar. I was so motivated at the beginning, made a perfect spreadsheet, set reminders, promised myself I'd never miss a single day. And then, about 2 weeks in, life got busy. I had a tough week at work, I was stressed, and I just stopped. I forgot for a day, then 2. Suddenly I'd broken my big promise to myself. It felt awful. And I really questioned, is this even worth it? Am I just someone who can't stick with things? That's when Jim Rohn's words echoed back to me. He said, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Not motivation. Not luck. Discipline. I realized that I wasn't a failure, I just hit a bump in the road. So instead of throwing out the whole habit, I tried something new. I forgave myself. I literally said out loud, okay, you missed a couple days, but you're still in this. Then I opened up my spreadsheet, looked at what I'd missed, and picked up right where I left off. That tiny choice, to return, instead of quit, was a game changer for me. I started to see setbacks as part of the process, not a sign to give up. Honestly, it happened again and again. There were weeks when I didn't read a single page of a new book, or times I spent hours scrolling on my phone instead of practicing a new skill. Each time, I heard Rohn's advice, don't major in minor things. Get back to what matters. The more I forgave myself, the faster I bounced back. I stopped aiming for perfection and started aiming for progress. If I could just make a little bit of forward movement, even after a stumble, I counted that as a win. But let's be real, sometimes life will blindside you. There was a month when unexpected expenses wiped out my savings. I felt like everything I'd worked for had disappeared overnight. I was embarrassed, frustrated, and honestly, a little angry at myself for not being more prepared. It was tempting to see that as proof I just wasn't cut out for this. But I remembered something else from Jim Rohn, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. That one hit me hard. Instead of playing the victim, I tried to learn from it. I journaled about what happened, what I could have done differently, and how I might prepare better next time. That's one of the best habits I picked up, reflecting instead of blaming. When you hit a setback, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? Is there a lesson hidden in the discomfort? Usually, if I look hard enough, there's something valuable buried in the mess. Now, let's talk about staying motivated. Because let's be honest, some days you just don't feel like doing the work. The excitement fades, the goal feels far away, and those old habits start calling your name. I found that motivation doesn't usually show up on its own. I had to create it. One of my favorite tricks? I made my environment remind me of my goals. I put sticky notes on the fridge with my favorite Jim Rohn quotes. I set little calendar reminders that said things like, "Remember why you started." I even joined a small online group of people working on similar habits, so we could check in on each other. But here's the best part: the more consistent you are, even in tiny ways, the more progress you make, and that progress is the best motivation. When I looked back after a month and saw that I'd read 2 whole books, or noticed that my spending patterns were changing, I felt proud. That pride turned into more energy for the next step. Rohn also talks about the value of keeping promises to yourself. He says, self-discipline is the magic power that makes you virtually unstoppable. So I started making smaller, more realistic promises. Instead of "I'll read an hour every single day," I'd say, "Just 5 pages tonight." Or, "I'll track my spending for 3 days this week, no matter what." These little wins started stacking up. My confidence grew, not because I was perfect, but because I kept coming back, again and again. Every time I honored those small promises, I built evidence that I was the kind of person who didn't quit. There's something else: I stopped doing this alone. For a long time, I thought self-improvement was a solo mission. But the truth is, accountability is a superpower. I told a close friend about my habits and asked them to check in with me once a week. Sometimes I'd even share my spreadsheet or what I was learning. That tiny bit of outside support made a huge difference. And when I felt myself slipping, I'd reach out and say, "Hey, I'm struggling this week. Can you remind me why I started?" Usually just saying it out loud was enough to get me moving again. So, if you're listening right now and you've hit a wall, let me just say, you're not alone. Everyone faces these moments. The difference isn't whether you stumble, it's whether you choose to get up one more time. That's what consistency really looks like. Not some perfect streak, but a willingness to recommit every time you fall off track. Maybe today you feel like you failed. Maybe you missed a week of tracking, or you overspent, or you skipped that skill building session. That doesn't erase your progress. You can start fresh right now. The next tiny action, a single page, 1 track purchase, a 5-minute practice session, can get you moving again. Here's a tip I picked up: celebrate every comeback, not just the big milestones. Whenever I caught myself returning after a setback, I'd do something small to mark it: a favorite snack, a quick walk, or just taking a deep breath and acknowledging, "Hey, I didn't give up." That little act of celebration made me associate bouncing back with a tiny bit of joy, instead of shame. It's also important to remember that your journey is unique. Comparing your setbacks to someone else's highlight reel is a recipe for discouragement. Jim Rohn said, "The major key to your better future is you. Your pace, your path, your progress, they all belong to you." One thing that helped me immensely was keeping a simple progress journal. Every week, I'd jot down 3 things: what went well, what didn't, and what I wanted to try next. Sometimes the went well list was really short. Sometimes the didn't list was pretty long. But just by pausing to reflect, I felt more in control. I saw patterns and started to anticipate my own weak spots. Over time, I noticed that the setbacks got less scary. It wasn't that I stopped failing, it's that I got so much better at recovering. That resilience, that ability to bounce back, is a muscle you can build. Every time you practice it, you get a little stronger. And if you ever feel like you've lost your way, go back to your why. Why did you start these habits in the first place? For me, it was about freedom. About proving to myself I could change my patterns. About being able to look in the mirror and know I was building a future I could be proud of. Jim Rohn's philosophy is really about transformation from the inside out. He believed that success is something you attract by the person you become. And becoming that person? It's not about never making mistakes, it's about choosing to grow, over and over again. So, here's my advice for keeping yourself accountable. First, set small, specific goals. Make them so easy, they're almost impossible to ignore. 5 pages. $1 tract. 10 minutes of practice. Second, find someone you trust to share your goals with. It could be a friend, a partner, even an online community. Ask them to check in, not to criticize, but to encourage you. Third, keep track of your progress. It doesn't have to be fancy, a notebook, a digital note, whatever works for you. Review it regularly and celebrate the wins, no matter how tiny. Fourth, when you slip up, and you will, practice self-compassion. Acknowledge the setback, look for the lesson, and get back to it. Don't let guilt trick you into quitting. Finally, revisit your why often. Remind yourself what you're working toward, and let that vision pull you forward when motivation runs dry. I'll be honest, there are still days when I struggle. But every time I fall and get back up, I build just a little more trust in myself. I'm learning that the real victory isn't never falling, it's refusing to stay down. So if you're in a tough place right now, I want you to know, you're already further ahead than you think, just by deciding to try again. As Jim Rohn put it, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. Even on the messy days. Even when you don't feel like it. Stay patient with yourself. Celebrate your comebacks. And keep going. Because consistency isn't about being perfect, it's about becoming the kind of person who shows up, even when it's hard. You've got this. And I'm right here, cheering you on. And that brings us here, right to this moment, with you listening, and me sharing everything I've learned from Jim Rohn's wisdom and my own journey. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, or maybe even a little fired up, that's exactly where real change begins. It's not about having it all figured out right away. Honestly, if you're waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect starting line, you'll be waiting forever. So, if you're sitting there wondering, where do I even start? Let me just tell you, start small. Seriously. Start tiny. Pick the smallest thing you can do today that nudges you in the right direction. Maybe it's jotting down what you spend for just one day. Or pulling a book off your shelf you've been meaning to read. Or even just pausing for a second to imagine, what skill could I grow if I stuck with it for a month? That's it. That's the first domino. Jim Rohn used to say, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. I repeat that to myself all the time, because when life gets busy or discouraging, it's those simple disciplines that keep you grounded. You don't need to transform your life overnight. Think about it like planting a seed. You water it, give it sunlight, and trust that it will grow, even if you can't see the results right away. Looking back, the habits that made the biggest difference for me all started as tiny, almost laughable efforts. The first time I tracked my spending, it was just scribbles on an old envelope. The first book I invested in, I honestly wondered if it would just collect dust. And the first skill I tried to learn, I had no clue where it would take me. I just kept showing up, one small step at a time. So, what's your next small step? Is it grabbing a notebook and recording every dollar that passes through your hands, just for today? Is it carving out 10 minutes to read a chapter of something new, even if it feels like you don't have the time? Or maybe it's watching a free tutorial online or practicing a skill you want to sharpen. None of these things feel huge in the moment. But trust me, stacked up, day after day, they're life-changing. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this: you are not stuck. Wherever you are right now, whatever your bank balance, your job, your skill set, your confidence, it's not set in stone. Jim Rohn always believed that your past doesn't have to equal your future. If you want something different, start acting a little differently, even in the smallest ways. And don't be afraid to track your progress, too. Sometimes we get so caught up in what's next, we forget to pause and notice how far we've come. Celebrate the little wins. Maybe you managed to not impulse buy that coffee today. Or you set aside $5 for a future book. Or you made it through a chapter you would have skipped before. These are victories. They matter. Because when you string together enough of those tiny victories, you build momentum. And momentum is what makes change sustainable. I get it, some days are harder than others. You'll slip up. I still do. There are days I don't want to look at my budget, or I just can't focus on reading, or I feel like my skills aren't growing fast enough. But here's what keeps me going: the understanding that growth isn't linear, and progress isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, especially on the tough days. It's about forgiving yourself and picking right back up where you left off. That's real resilience. That's what Jim Rohn preached, and it works. And if you ever need a reminder or a little nudge, come back to this podcast. You're not in this alone. There's a whole community of us, people who've decided to say, yes, I can. We're all out here, taking baby steps, messing up, learning, picking ourselves up, and trying again. And every single one of us started with just one small, simple action. Maybe you're thinking, but what if I fail? Well, let me flip that. What if you don't? What if this year, these tiny habits you start today, become the foundation for something incredible? Imagine looking back a year from now and seeing how these little choices stacked up. The money you saved, the books you read, the skills you picked up, none of it happens in a day, but all of it is possible. The secret is, you don't need anyone's permission to begin. You don't need to wait for everything to be perfect, or for someone else to believe in you. You just need to start. The resources are out there, the books are waiting, the skills are teachable, and you have more ability than you give yourself credit for. If you found even one idea in this episode that made you think, hey, maybe I can do this, then do me a favor, give yourself a real shot at it. Pick that one habit. Commit to a week, or a month, or just today. Whatever feels doable. Write it down. Set a reminder. Tell a friend. Let yourself be accountable, not to some impossible standard, but to the possibility that things can get better. And if you need more encouragement, or just want to keep this momentum going, I'd love for you to subscribe to Yes You Can. That way, you will get more tips, more stories, and more practical advice to help you along the way. And let's be real, having a little reminder pop up in your feed to keep going can make all the difference on the tough days. Before we wrap up, I want to thank you, truly, for spending your time here with me. Your time is valuable, and the fact that you've invested it in learning, growing, and thinking about your future means you're already ahead of the curve. You could have checked out a million other things online today, but you chose to invest in yourself. That's something to be proud of. I'd also love to hear from you. What small step are you taking after this episode? What habit do you want to try, or what book are you excited to dive into? Drop a comment, send a message, or share your journey, because you never know who else you might inspire just by sharing your progress. The ripple effect is real. Every person who starts, who grows, who changes, even a little, makes it easier for someone else to do the same. And remember, You're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming for progress. One step, one habit, one day at a time. That's it. If I can do it, trust me, so can you. So let's keep growing together. Let's keep learning, keep building, keep showing up for ourselves and for each other. I'm here with you, cheering you on, and I can't wait to see what you accomplish next. Thanks again for being here. Don't forget to subscribe to Yes You Can if you haven't already, and share this with anyone who might need a little boost. Until next time, keep taking those small steps, and remember, you're capable of way more than you think. Stay inspired, keep going, and I'll talk to you soon.